"Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom," said the little boy to the CEO sitting alone at the park. The autumn wind swept through the empty park as the city lights began to blur into streaks behind Adrian Cole's tired eyes. He wasn't the type of man who cried in public. People like him, men who sat at the head of long conference tables, who signed decisions that could move millions, were never supposed to fall apart. Yet there he was, a 40-year-old CEO with trembling hands, loosened tie, and tears slipping quietly down his face as he sat on a cold bench that had once held far better versions of himself. He felt hollow, defeated, and dangerously close to giving up on everything he'd built. And that's when a small voice pierced the silence, soft but strangely powerful, the kind that reaches straight into the cracks of a broken heart. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly supports the channel and helps us bring more stories like this to you. Adrian lifted his head, startled, and found a little boy no older than 6 standing in front of him, clutching a worn-out toy truck against his chest. His eyes were wide, innocent, and full of concern no adult had shown Adrian in weeks. The child tilted his head slightly, studying him the way children do, without judgment, without barriers, before saying the words that instantly stole the breath from Adrian's lungs. "You can borrow my mom if you want, mister. She makes me feel better when I'm sad." Adrian blinked, confused, but before he could speak, the boy pointed toward a woman sitting a few feet away under a street lamp. She was reading a book, her face calm but tired, a soft glow warming her features. Something about her, maybe the quiet strength in her posture or the gentleness she radiated, made the world feel less cruel for a moment. The boy's name, he'd later learn, was Theo. But that night, he was simply the stranger who approached a lonely man at the exact moment he needed a miracle. Adrian tried to smile, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed. He had spent the past month losing everything that mattered, his company slipping through his fingers after a series of losses, the board turning against him, his closest friend betraying him, and worst of all, his father, the person he had worked so hard to make proud, passing away unexpectedly. No title, no money, no achievement could shield him from the chaos that had swallowed his life whole. Theo didn't know any of that. All he saw was a man who looked sad, and to him, sadness was something that deserved comfort. The little boy climbed onto the bench beside Adrian, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. His small presence, warm and simple, began to chase away the heaviness that had been suffocating Adrian for days. The man hadn't realized how desperately he needed human kindness until it came from the last place he expected. Theo's mother, Emma, eventually noticed her son's absence and walked over with a concerned expression. But when she saw Adrian's red eyes and the way Theo sat beside him protectively, her gaze softened instead of sharpening with suspicion. She apologized gently, but Adrian shook his head, assuring her he wasn't bothered. Emma had the kind of voice that felt like a warm blanket, steady, quiet, and safe. She sat on the bench's edge when Theo urged her to, explaining shyly that the mister is sad and needs us. For the first time in weeks, Adrian let himself talk. Not in the polished corporate vocabulary he used with shareholders, not in the guarded tones he used with journalists. He spoke like a man who was tired, lost, and trying to breathe in a world that was squeezing too tightly. He told them about his father, about the betrayal, about the collapse of everything he had worked for, about the crushing loneliness that followed. Emma didn't interrupt, didn't flinch, didn't judge. She simply listened, and that was enough to steady the ground beneath him. Theo kept handing him small things, a leaf he found pretty, his toy truck, a half-eaten candy, to make the mister happy again. It was clumsy, innocent, and heartbreakingly sincere, and every small gesture stitched something inside Adrian back together. As the night deepened, the three of them sat in that silent corner of the park like they had known each other far longer than a single hour. Emma shared how she had been raising Theo alone since his father left before he was born, how she worked 2 jobs, how she still made time every evening to bring him to this park so he could collect happiness before bedtime. She smiled when she said it, but Adrian saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. He realized then that pain didn't care about status. Whether you were a CEO or a struggling single mom, everyone had storms to survive. When they finally stood to leave, Theo wrapped his tiny arms around Adrian's leg and whispered, "You're not alone now." It was such a simple promise, but it shattered something in him, something hard and heavy that had been keeping him in the dark. In the days that followed, Adrian found himself returning to the park. At first he didn't know why. Later he understood being near them made him feel human again. Theo treated him like a friend, not a failure. Emma offered compassion without expecting anything in return. Their presence became an anchor in a life that had been drifting dangerously close to the edge. Slowly, Adrian began to rebuild. He confronted the board, cleared his name, and started restructuring his company. But what changed him the most wasn't business strategy. It was the realization that sometimes strangers could become family in ways blood never could. Months passed, and the bond between them grew. Adrian became someone Theo looked up to, someone who showed up for soccer practices, someone who replaced the broken toy truck with a new one, but kept the old one because it brought us together. And somewhere along the way, Adrian found his heart pulling toward Emma, with a quiet longing he hadn't felt in years. By the time spring arrived, the man who once sat trembling on a cold bench had transformed into someone stronger, softer, and profoundly grateful. All because a small boy had walked up to him on the worst night of his life and offered the purest kind of kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more emotional stories like this. Before we end, tell us in the comments, do you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life? And with that, the story closes on the image of a little boy tugging a CEO's hand, saying, "Come on, mister. It's time to collect happiness." Again, reminding us all that sometimes the smallest hearts carry the greatest magic.